Morning, everybody. Crappy Mondays. Welcome to the news agenda of me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie. Morning, Jason.
Morning, Susie.
We're probably going to be joined by some far-right trolls at some point as well, but let's just pretend they're not
just
here.
Add to the pleasure, Susie.
Add to the fun. We'll pretend they're not really here, or occasionally I might go out and just smack them. Now, this is the People's Pay-Per-View, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to hope that Keir Starmer can magic up enough prison cells to hold all the country's wrong-uns. Now, what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the riots that took place across Britain over the weekend, saying the country is under siege. We'll get into that in more detail in a moment. But first, I want to take us to page 14, where the new Labour government has got an entirely different problem in the shape of a backlash to Rachel Reeves' controversial decision to remove the £300 winter fuel payment to most pensioners, including those who are very near the pension credit claim line. And Jason, can you sort of take us through this? Who's complaining about it?
Lots of people. So this is a kind of coalition of charities, support groups, organisations, varying from the charities such as Age UK, which kind of have long-standing being kind of the voice of the older generation, to organisations such as Scope, the disability charity, and there is concern about removing winter fuel payments. Now, the background to this, Susie, was, Rachel Reeves comes into government, new chancellor, opens the books at the Treasury, and it's pretty grim. The Tories had and this is just this current year's spending. They found according to the Treasury number crunchers, a 22 billion kind of hole in the finances. Reserves, money the Treasury sets aside for emergency, had been spent 3 times over, and she needed to find some money. And then this became the political question. That's the difficult, the finding the hole was the easy bit, blaming the Tories is the easy bit, but then you've got to make your choices yourself. And one of the areas she looked at and decided which could go was the winter fuel payments. Now, it doesn't say on the scale of things a massive amount of money. It's about 1.2 to 2 billion a year. And the argument is that it's a universal benefit. So if you're a multimillionaire living in a very, very nice house, let's say on Sandbanks, for instance. So, take Harry Redknapp. He lives in a multi-million house in Sandbanks in Poole in Dorset. He's a pensioner. He gets winter fuel payment. Yeah. So you can see why this is a kind of like a kind of, you're looking at this and going, well, do they really need it? Now, the problem is there's around 2 million pensioners who are in fuel poverty, i.e. they can't afford to cover their fuel bills. And, for a lot of them, it's a choice between heating and eating. And although the Chancellor has said, look, if you're on pension credits or benefits, you'll still get this payment. And not enough people on pension credits actually apply for it. And we need the uptake to improve. There's that a number of people, I can't put an exact figure on it, who are on the edge, i.e. they're not in receipt of pensioner benefits, but they're still poor. And the winter fuel payment is, when bills are set to increase by 15% this winter, are essential. Hence the backlash.
Yeah, so
difficult.
it's a difficult one to do, and so the reason that it's universal, of course, when it was brought in, was because pensioners, perhaps more than any other group of society, are not very likely to go through means testing forms and so on for things, and therefore the people who really need it definitely wouldn't get it. And the sort of the benefit of giving the winter fuel payment to people like Harry Redknapp and Alan Sugar and stuff was that actually the amount that you wasted giving it to people like that was offset by the amount you didn't have to spend running a system of bureaucracy to do all the checks and make it means test. It actually costs more to do that, in a way. Was the theory at the time, as I recall. Now, we've taken this away from them because or Rachel Reeves has, because we didn't have the money to pay for it, apparently.
Mm.
So we've taken that back and spend it on other stuff, which perhaps the same people might also benefit from some way further down the road in a different way, perhaps not quite so direct. And there's criticism for who's going to be missed out and how it's going to be missed out. Vicky says they give our pensioners their money back. But that is going to be the case, isn't it? With every single spending decision. It doesn't matter what it is that you decide not to spend on. You spend on one thing, you have to not spend on something else. So if you spend on a hospital, the argument always is made, you can't give the same pay rise to nurses. If you do give teachers a pay rise, you can't put a new roof on the school. Now, there should be a way that you can do both those things because they're quite important, for example. But if you want to appear, as this government does, fiscally competent, you have to say, we're not going to spend what we don't have. We're going to spend what we can. We're going to save where we can. Labour is sort of stuffed if they do and stuffed if they don't, aren't they?
Well, I mean, it was Nye Bevan who said, socialism is the language of priorities. And there are people arguing, well, look, was this the easiest way to save money? Why are we penalising pensioners who are, as I said, or on this kind of cusp of this issue of where they don't qualify for benefits, but they're still, struggling financially? Why are we penalising them? There are other areas of taxation, and we could have looked at, for example, the freezing fuel duty that costs $5 billion a year. Now that's actually, interestingly, also a kind of universal payment. So if you have a car, in fact, if you have more than one car, you still get the benefit of that. And you could argue that actually is kind of one of the most regressive forms of tax cuts in terms of it. It actually helps the wealthier, those who drive more and have bigger cars and fill up their car more often because they have bigger cars, often very expensive cars, get the same benefit. Now, she could have looked at that, but she decided she didn't want to kind of, antagonize car drivers. That's a political choice. There is some cynicism around the fact that if you looked at how people voted at the election, the one group which still holds out against Labour, which is still overwhelmingly voting Conservative, the over 65s. I wouldn't necessarily say this is what they're thinking within the Treasury, but perhaps if those people voted Labour, they might have got more reward.
The thing that occurred to me straight away as well is like the first difficult spending decision was to punish the people who didn't vote for them.
Yeah.
Which I can see coming, and people with big cars do vote. And we've got a few of them just voted Labour last time.
Yeah. And don't forget, Rachel Reeves plays chess. And one of the calculations which may have gone through her head, I'm just speculating here, Susie, is the Tories are now defending pensioners, and they're defending their core vote. And if you're Labour and you're saying, look, we're here for the next generation, we're building homes for young people, we're here for we're not gonna just pander to one demographic, and you've got the Tories having to kind of row back and kind of draw the wagons around this kind of this one group which does vote for them. That is politically, long-term strategically, maybe they're thinking. But this is still quite risky. There's a lot of Labour MPs muttering about it, and it's not just the usual suspects. There are, if you come winter, and the Mirror and when the Conservatives in power frequently ran stories of pensioners wrapped in blankets because they couldn't afford to heat their homes, or pensioners riding buses because that's the only way to keep warm. If those stories start emerging, that becomes politically damaging for Labour. Exactly.
I can kind of see, the argument perhaps that, well, look, we keep the Tories all the way over there with the increasingly diminished group of voters. And that means we've got everybody else. So we're keeping them in one corner field. We have the whole field to ourselves. But like you say, that bit's the field. They all get older eventually, if they're lucky. And they all have parents and grandparents. And it's not something that they they really want to see. I mean, I suppose the Labour argument is, well, if we can keep the Tories out of power, then we're in power for longer. We're doing more for all those people in the long run, in other things. And you won't be in fuel poverty once we have Great British Energy. And once you do this and once you do that and our other policies kick in, you'll be fine. Trouble is, this winter, 4 months' time, you don't have your 300 quid. And the gas bills.
And if it's a cold winter,
if
it's a prolonged cold spell, this could be really difficult for them.
Yes, we won't be very good, will it? Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about it again at the end. But I mean, are we going to this isn't going to change. This backlash isn't going to make any difference. What do you think, everybody? Do you think Rachel Reeves should reverse the decision, or do you think this is the right thing to have done? I mean, Jason, they've chosen how their politics want to look. You choose what you like, say, as priorities, and you choose what you want your politics to look like to the population. They've done this. They're not going to change it, are they?
Well, there is the other slightly bigger picture, which is, and this is incredibly sensitive, and I always get into trouble when I raise this because but it's been written about for some time now, but wealth in this country is skewed towards the older generations. Now, before anybody jumps on me, I know there's a lot of older people in poverty. I'm very aware of this. Yeah, I speak to my mother on a weekly basis, and she's very poor. She knows how hard it is to, to heat her home. Yeah, and there are a lot of older people who are struggling. I'm totally aware, but generally, the Tory party spent 14 years funneling money, everything they could, to make life better for pensioners, at the expense of everybody else. And so what you've got is an awful lot of people, who've done very, very well. The boomers have done very, very well from house prices. They've also got pension triple lock. And this is the first step to trying to redress that balance a little bit. And it's always going to be difficult. But actually, if you're a young person and you can't afford to get on a house ladder and you're struggling with really, really high rents and your prospects are pretty damn poor, and you're seeing all this wealth, accumulated by the older generation, you can understand why you would be a little bit angry.
Yeah, it does. It causes a problem, doesn't it? There's got to be a way through somehow.
But I can't stress enough, please don't jump on it. I'm very aware there's a lot of elderly people in poverty. I'm not denying that.
Okay. My parents got the winter fuel payment, and because there's two of them, they get double the winter fuel payment. And they've got a house that's probably a bit too big for them, and they've got a pension that they probably could afford to not have the winter fuel payment. But when they have it taken away, they go, well, things are actually now more difficult because we would factor it in. And, and their argument would be, I suppose, look, we've got a private pension, but it's a fixed amount of money, and our savings are a diminishing pot of money. And we're not going to go and earn any more cash next week. So this is what we have to live on for however long we're living. And we don't know where the money's going to or from, where the next money's coming from. Clown of the Times says 2/3 of the country didn't vote for Starmer's policies. This is unsustainable. It's what's happened in every government, I think, of the 20th and 21st centuries, I'm afraid.
Just to point out that even fewer voted for the other party's policies.
Yes, the electorate is not the same as the population of the country, number one. It's a chunk of it. A lot of those electorates do not vote, and I'm sure we're going to get onto them in the next story. And then, you have to have a 51% of the number of people who did vote. So it's always going to be a minority, I'm afraid. That's that. Dave says he wants a government who put the British first. Right. Let's move on then, shall we, to the main story of the day, because I think we've got our not normal guests watching. Hi, everyone. And the police, politicians and local residents all over the country are praying for rain to stop the wave of rioting that we've had. There's no other word for it. They are not protests. It is riots. Rioting that was seen in Bristol, Rotherham, Hull, Manchester, Weymouth, Tamworth. We had yobs throwing missiles at police. We had fires being set in hotels. We had asylum seekers hunted down by mobs. There were Filipino nurses on their way to provide emergency cover at hospitals being pelted with rocks. And now Malaysia has issued a travel warning to its citizens coming to Britain on holiday or, say, to work in the NHS or the care system. Please don't do that. It's terribly dangerous over there. Jason, this is Keir Starmer's first big test, isn't it? This is the one that wasn't in the diary. It wasn't a scheduled policy announcement. You can't possibly say it was a plan by Rachel Reeves to, cut taxes or something else. So far, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen much of him. Has he? What has he been doing to sort it out?
I think that's entirely fair. He did a press conference on Friday where he took a lot of questions.
Did he?
And then he gave a statement yesterday, which wasn't a press conference, it was another statement. And he's holding a Cobra meeting today. So I think to say he's been, off the stage is unfair. He's been there. It is a test in terms of if it continues beyond a few days, then it looks like the government's not in control. And I think you could kind of, do you remember the kind of fuel protests at the time of Tony Blair's government when the tanker drivers went on strike? And I can't even remember what their grievance was about now. And there was a worry that the whole country was going to run to a standstill and this would be catastrophic for Tony Blair. And actually, after 4 days, they managed to kind of resolve a problem. If I was in number 10 at the moment, my concern would be: are we going to face a rough summer of rioting, or are we just facing 7 days?
Yeah.
And I say, the longer it goes on, the more damaging it becomes, because then you look like you're not in control.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember reporting on the 2011 riots, which again was in the summer because it was good weather until it rained and then went home, and that was sparked by, I think it was Mark Duggan and allegations of police brutality. But there was, that was kind of the other end, I suppose, of the political spectrum. They were younger people, not older people. They were more middle-aged, some of the guys who were writing this weekend. And they were sort of anarchists and a bit more left, anti-austerity. Lots of things got pulled into it, but it ended up just being thuggery and smashing up, Porsche car showrooms and stuff like that. Rob says they've only been in a few weeks. Give them a chance. Peter on Twitter says, smash the smuggling gang, smash the far right. That's only in the first 2 months. He's got a lot of smashing to do. We've got this situation where, there's a huge amount of pressure on this. In 2011, I remember Dave Cameron had to come back from his tennis holiday in, where was it, Umbria or something, where he had his private tennis coach, and had to come back and look tough. And they would talk about water cannon and stuff like this. That's when Boris bought his water cannon, I think, that we never got used. So Keir gave this press conference at the weekend. The Home Secretary's been out talking about lots of stuff about smashing these people, about getting tough on them. And I think there's another prime ministerial holiday planned, allegedly, at the end of the week. I don't know if he's going to be going on it. But if it doesn't stop, if it doesn't rain, what can they do, really, about this?
Well, now that's a really good question. So on Friday, Starmer was quite interesting because he said, look, the key thing as far as we can see we need better coordination amongst the police forces, because the rioters are seem to be coordinating via social media. We'll come on to social media and its malign influence in a minute. But he said, we don't need new laws. We just need to enforce the existing laws. Now, the question would be, is if the rioting continues, and if these thugs continue to do the abhorrent behaviour which you catalogued at the beginning, then there will start to be a clamour for look, is there more the government should be doing, whether it is knee-jerk or not? And people will say, look, what about imposing curfews? Are the existing punishments, whoever Goisel said, in terms of longer prison sentence, are they adequate? So At the moment, they're kind of holding a line of saying, look, we think we can still deal with this in the existing laws, but there's a lot of anger out there at the fact that these people just seem to be getting away with it, and they haven't been cleared off the streets yet. And that, you know, that's where the kind of the political sensitivity is for Starmer, because that, you know, people want to see they want to see justice now.
Yeah, but when you have things like this, people do start saying, well, yes, water cannons seem a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Whereas other times you suggest water cannon, they go, what? No, we're not that sort of country. But when people start rioting and there's, you know, looting, and you're worried about your own safety and that of your family or your home, you do start going, no, I don't mind the busies going in boot first. That's okay. So Leslie says, well, the pensioners aren't rioting. Good point, Leslie. And I think also some of the people who are rioting probably were not ones who recently made some decisions, you know, about which political party they wanted to support at the general election. I'm suspecting most of those who've been throwing bricks at the busies were not the ones who are at the ballot box recently. Mutt says the instigators are the government. I don't know how you have got to that point, Mutt, at all, because whatever is happening right now, if you want to say that the riots are due to failure of politics to address an immigration issue, right? If that's what we're saying, number one, that immigration issue is a worldwide phenomenon which no government's really got its head round. So it's a bit rubbish to just blame this one. This government is particularly new and fresh, and it can't possibly have done anything in that time to fix it. Just can't. Whatever problem you've got with immigration right now, whether it's asylum seekers in hotels, whether it's the rate of immigration or something else, that's down to the last government who did all that, right? So we can blame the current one perhaps for not arresting enough people or not jailing enough people or not cracking down hard enough. We can't really blame them yet for creating the problem those people claim to be rioting about. But I would just point out to Mutt and to everybody else that if you didn't have immigration, if you didn't have a level of immigration which people were complaining about, where would the far right be? These people, they wouldn't have a reason to exist, right? There wouldn't be a reason to riot. They need immigration in order to justify going out and doing what they're doing here. Tommy Robinson needs immigration in order to pay for his sunbed in Cyprus. Goisel says, send the thugs to Rwanda. The thing about Rwanda, Goisel, according to the new government when they went in and looked at the books, is that would cost £10 billion. That's 5 times your winter fuel payment to pensioners. Is that value for money? Really, if you think about it. And if you suggest spending £10 billion on that, where are you taking the money from? And who's going to riot if you take that money away from them to spend it to go to the Rwandan? What you're talking about is not you're sending thugs to Rwanda. You're sending all your taxes to the Rwandan government to do it. That's what you're talking about, okay? And I bet most people on those riots don't want any tax money, if they pay taxes, to go to a different government. They want it spent in their country. It's not going to happen if you have the Rwanda scheme, I'm afraid. Taze says, well done to my British patriot thugs. Okay, but I think we've had enough trolls now. But Taze, if you're a thug, you're not a patriot. Look up the etymology of the word thug, number one. And number two, this is not making Britain look good. And it is not loving your country. And the people that are out causing this kind of chaos are not the ones who are out with the brooms sweeping it up the next morning. If they love their country that much, perhaps that's what they'd do. If they were so bothered about protecting children, perhaps they'd be having riots or protests outside Hugh Edwards' court appearances. But they're not, are they? They're having a big fight with the police, who are not able to police all the other things they need to do while they're busy lamping these football hooligans. This is what's going on. The police are busy here, as we can see on this video. I think this is Middlesbrough. They've got a line of coppers there with their truncheons out, being basically head to with a bunch of people who want to fight with them in a car park. If the police weren't there, they could be out there investigating child abuse, whatever. Sorry, that was Rotherham. They could be out doing all the other stuff that we need them to do. Right? But because of these so-called patriots, they're in a car park having their legs broken. Right? That's not patriotism, mate. That's just having a fight with the busies. Shire says these are not child protectors. Of course they're not. Of course they're not. If they're child protectors, they wouldn't be taking their kids with them on the riot, right? I've been to riots. I've covered riots. The idea of a child being there is insane. It's only taking your own to riot. No, don't do it. Right, we've had enough of the trolls. They can go and play by themselves in the comments now. But what do you think? Everybody else out there who's not completely mad, what do you think about these riots and these protests? What do you want to see your government do to tackle this? Do you think that they have some kind of a legitimate point? I struggle to see it myself. And do you think that there should be more of a crackdown, something more obvious? And we've had about, Jason, I think about 400 arrests, but there's thousands of people that are involved in this. Some of them are getting bussed in and moved around, but there doesn't seem to be a really clear ringleader. It's not like there's one person, like one hate preacher that's going out and doing all this. We do have, though, lots of the usual suspects, don't we? There's Tommy Robinson stoking it from his sunbed in Cyprus at an all-inclusive hotel. It's been paid for by so-called patriots. Lawrence Fox has been viewed, I think, 2 million times on Twitter, blaming child rape on barbarian immigrants, without having apparently noticed at all what Hugh Edwards was looking at the other day. And there are laws, like Keir Starmer says, there's laws against inciting riots, against rioting, against entering hotels, against throwing rocks at people. There's talk of magistrates sitting through the night to try and process some of these people. But do we really got the jail places to keep all these people off the streets? I think if there's 400 arrests, we had, 1,000 spare places the other day?
I mean, look, I think we definitely need to see action taken against those who have instigated and stirred up hatred in this way. And it is, as Starmer said on Friday, this is a criminal offence. If it's on social media and you're doing this, that's a criminal offence. And I'd like to see not just the people making these postings, but also the social media companies held to account for what they're doing, because they are partly responsible. Yeah. I think, there is also a wider discussion to be had about the language used by politicians, because words have consequences. We know this. When Boris Johnson made his jibe about women who wear the burqa, comparing them to pillar boxes, following those comments, there was a large increase in Islamophobic attacks. There's a direct correlation. Now, some of these people, the politicians, say we're voicing genuine concerns. But if you voice genuine concerns with emotive and sometimes sensational language, you're not necessarily directly responsible for what we've seen on the streets, but you have given these people the grammar for what they're doing. And until we have more restraint and less inflammatory words from politicians, we're probably going to keep seeing this, because these people feel they have license. They don't.
Yeah.
And their behavior is abhorrent, and it's criminal. And they need to be called out for that time and time again. But we also need to say, what is the kind of, what is the environment, the political and social culture they're operating in, which makes them feel that they can do this? They are chanting "Stop the boats." Those words haven't come from nowhere. Yeah, there is a correlation between what somebody stands up and says, and in this case, it was the Prime Minister in Downing Street repeatedly for 14 months, and how people behave on the streets.
Yeah, and like we just had comments, someone saying, send them to Rwanda, because we've been told over and over again, sending them to Rwanda will fix it. But how many people know the cost of the Rwanda scheme, know how the Rwanda scheme works, know what you're paying for, know who you're paying for, know what the contracts involved? People don't know all that necessarily, and they shouldn't have to. But if someone repeatedly says things, like you say, for reasons of sloganeering, and then they're repeated out at a riot where the people are lamping police officers, we saw in the election campaign, didn't we, how personally upset Rishi Sunak was about racism, especially when it was directed at him and his family. And here we've got racism that's directed perhaps at other people, but at people that look like him, and who is being directed by people who are uttering a slogan that he or his team came up with, and he made part of the public conversation. I cannot believe, I mean, I can believe, but I am amazed that he hasn't come out and said, that's not what we meant. I mean, he's lost the election now. He's not like he's got anything to lose, right? He can't just come out and say, no, this is not it. These guys are not on our side. And he hasn't, and he isn't. And the Tory leadership contenders are all having a bit of an argument about whether or not the political failure is that we need to be more what the far right want us to be. And that's what I find really terrifying. People like Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman and so on are saying we need to answer these people's concerns about immigration. I mean, no one would say, well, you know, Hitler and his lot are terribly upset. We need to answer their concerns about the Jewish community.
Yeah, it's a completely fallacious argument. You can have concerns about immigration and don't have to actually, you know, put bricks through library windows and attack the police with violence or burn down hospitals.
If you took away every immigrant in the country, are those people out there rioting? Are they any happier? Are they any more productive? Are they going to work and paying their taxes and being well behaved and not getting arrested by the police?
No.
I'm going to go with no. I don't think they'd be any happier, personally. Geisel says, anyway, I have to go to work now while the rioters sit at home smoking weed, playing their PlayStations and waiting for Gyro Day. What a world we live in. There are lots of people that have been talking about this, and it's Labour's failure to stop the boats. And it's kind of the conversation that's happening in homes up and down the country as well, not backing Rwanda. But the riots don't have any sort of political bent. They're not out there rioting, discussing the 10 billion on Rwanda and whether it's value for money. They're just throwing rocks at the busies. Why don't we call this terrorism, Jason? It feels like terrorism. To some extent, it certainly probably feels like it if you live there, if you're the one in the hotel, if you're a nurse on your way to work, or if you're a copper and there's a rock aimed at your head, it feels quite terrifying. It is terrorism, isn't it? Or is this, you know?
I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer, what the legal definition of terrorism is, and there may be a reason for that, but I'd much rather just call it thuggery. I mean,
yeah.
Call it out for what it is. It's criminality. It's Don't grace them with anything.
But if we've had
exactly what they are.
We've had governments that call sitting down on a motorway bridge terrorism, and they get jailed for 5 years for planning it. And if that's the case, you can argue about whether that's fair or not. But if that's the case, then surely inciting people on Telegram or suggesting or planning or sending out a flyer to go, let's go and have a riot with the police, surely that is, it's definitely a crime of some sort. But it merits a few years, I would have thought. We shall see, won't we, what Keir manages to do and how he cracks down on it. Anyway, let's try and clear our heads of some of this crap, if it's possible. Let's concentrate on the fact there are people in all those places now organising, going out with brooms and wheelbarrows and cleaning it up, because that's nicer. And we have managed to find some good news in the world for you. Here it is. Now, there's not a lot of good news today, I'll tell you, for obvious reasons. We have struggled to find the one glimmer of hope, but there is one. There is a new garden being opened at Benningborough Hall in North Yorkshire, which is been stocked with Mediterranean plants to show what could be possible to survive harsh summers and wet winters, but yet also still produce pollinators for bees, provide a haven for wildlife, and of course be beautiful, just be perhaps slightly different to what we're used to. Jason, is this proof, do you think, can we hope that if you think things through and you plant the right seeds at the right time, the future doesn't have to be quite as grim as the present? Maybe.
It's the way forward. I don't know, this is already happening in the gardening world, Susie, isn't it? You have No Mow May to try and make lawns more wildlife friendly, where the plants on sale in shops are already changing, so they're more kind of Mediterranean and South African plants on sale. We have to accept that, we are going to have, as a result of a climate crisis, kind of more unsettled, hotter and possibly wetter weather in perpetuity now. And it's only going to get worse unless they do something about it. So that's not very cheery good news, is it?
But there are people thinking about it. There are people planning.
But it is lovely, these gardens, and I think it's gorgeous. And I like, I like the fact that, we're moving away from the kind of the idea of the pristine garden to slightly more raggedy gardens. And I say that that's because my garden's complete mess.
Yeah, there's one of the pictures actually above the Rachel Reeves image, which this guy's got just full of hanging baskets full of petunias, which must be very water intensive. It does look lovely, but it's quite interesting when you look at that in the paper. You've got that, and you've got the dry garden that makes a huge difference. But at least perhaps there are people planning things and doing stuff behind the scenes that we don't have to worry about. We'll make things okay in the end. Keir Starmer, if you're listening, please try and sort it out. Anyway, thank you, Jason, for taking part.
Susie.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thanks for the trolls. You were fun. Bye-bye. And we will see you all again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, everyone, take care. Tatty bye.